Hello everybody, welcome to this self-made tutorial in which I'm going to explain how two Unity beginner projects work, the mechanics practice with them, and some general tips I have learned that may be useful to develop games in this platform. I have selected Rollable and Survival Shooter projects since I do not have previous knowledge in programming games and I consider them appropriate to get started. Let's begin with Rollable. Rollable is a game in which the player can control a ball with the keyboard for picking up and counting special game objects, in this case the yellow cubes. It displays the current count and ends the game when all the game objects are collected. Let's make a short demonstration. Ta-da! The game objects have been created using primitive shapes. Some materials needed to change their color and background has been created as well. How to add components and how to position them in the scene was also learned in this tutorial. For moving the player game objects, physics forces and player input by C# script language programming were used, which allowed the player to control the ball. Here. The camera has to move relative to the player, so it has been necessary to associate the camera with the player game object by a C# script to make it follow the rolling ball without rotation. The next step was to set up the play area with walls by adjusting axis values so that the ball won't fall off the platform, as well as create and place the pickup collectible objects. Here you have the 4 walls that has been edited. Their appearance was changed, the size, color, and the rotation by C# script. A prefab was created with a template of the game object in which all of them could be duplicated as many times as the designer wanted. In this case, the cube was duplicated 12 times. For picking the game object, when the player game object collides with them, collisions between both of them have to be detected. Trigger volumes were added in order to be able to collect them. A trigger is something that doesn't have a physical appearance, so it is a collider. They have to be dynamic, so the game object needs both a collider and a rigid body. Finally, it is possible to display text and values through UI toolset elements. They must be the child of a canvas to behave correctly. The color, text, and location can be changed all over the scene, and scripting the player game object is needed to display a text. The 12 game objects are collected. So here you have the count text. It starts to count the cubes collected, so from 0 to 12. And here you have the win text. It appears when the player ends the game. So this is the end of the first project. You have to build the game as a standalone application if you want to play more times, but I found important to remember the main advice to work in Unity. Organization and hierarchy is key to create a successful game. So this is all for this first project. Let's move to Survival Shooter. Survival Shooter is a top-down isometric style shooter game in which the player is a boy who is having a dream that all of his toys come to life. He is able to shoot and kill all his enemies, but it is not possible to win the game. You can only eventually lose. Let's make a short demonstration. So this infinite game has several steps. The first step was to set up the environment. In this game they have used a great amount of pre-designed templates for the scene, player, enemies, etc., as well as audio sources that can be adjusted, the volume can be balanced, and so on. It is important to remember before starting working on a scene to position all the elements at origin, that is to say the X, the Y and the Z axis equal to 0. A plain quad or floor was added and scaled to cover the entire game level. For making it invisible and do not distract the player, the mesh render was removed. Here, if I play zoom, you can see the whole floor. For the player character, that is to say the boy, they also use a pretty sign template. It is important to first tag the player in order to behave appropriately when they are playing. Physics are necessary to give something physical presence in the world or a scene, so the player was added a rigid body to become present and a capsule collider to make things to bump into him. An animator controller that allows it to move, turn, shoot was also added, and the different player state to alive, dead, these behaviors or movements were scheduled by a C# script. The player gun was animated as well. They added a particle component which enables the gun to split fire, sound for hearing when the player is firing, light for illuminating the scene when firing, and a line renderer, which is the line the player fired out like a laser. Of course, it was a script for allowing the player to fire the gun and harm the enemies. A raycasting was a script to figure out where is being hit with the gun. It is necessary to make the guy follow the player, so a nav mesh agent is added to it. It is used for a simple AI in Unity. You can do a process called bake that specifies which parts of the level are navigable, and then you have an agent, which is something that is going to traverse or move over that environment. As in Rollable, the camera has to be set up for tracking the character and rotating with the player. In this case, they use an isometric view and an orthographic projection for enabling a better perspective. As mentioned before, in this project there are some enemies whose main objective is to follow around and attack the player. There are 3 types: some bunnies, some bears and elephants. All these 3 follow a pretty same template and share the same characteristics, such as shootable layer that allows the player to hit the enemies, a rigid body to become present, a sphere collider to detect and attack the player and takes his health away, run around and chase the player with an animation controller that edit animation with parameters, conditions for the transitions, etc. And their movements are coded by a C# script and all behave equally. Which is really important in this game is an enemy manager. Spawning enemies manager to create them during the game is necessary. Spawn begins at 0. It is important to establish where the enemies are going to appear and when. There are different spawn points in different places. Time need to be spawned as well. A heads-up display for health was also created using UI tools. It creates a canvas that will have all the child elements attached and stay to the scale of the screen. Allow to stay full screen even if you are working for different resolutions. Health UI tool provides the images relative to the player life, decreases value when it is hurt by an enemy, or the visual damage feedback. So, in general, what the character's health do is to give the player the ability to have health and the enemy the ability to attack him and take his health away, and vice versa. And all of this is done by a C# script. As in every game, the player wants to see the points score. Here, the UI tools are again required for displaying text. As explained in Rollable, you can change color, position, etc. The score has been scripted to update automatically when the player kills the enemies. There is also a prefab for the different enemies for make them to restart when the boy dies. Finally, it is necessary to show the player when the game has ended, apart from just having to fall over. So again, UI tools are needed, in particular HUD canvas images and animation. Scripting for reference the player health is key to run the game and finish it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you like my tutorial and see you in another time.